All right, for those of you who I have not met, I am Deputy Secretary Emily Ann Gullickson, and it's a privilege to be with all of you here today on behalf of Governor Glenn Youngkin and Secretary of Education Amy Gadara. Virginia, as you all know, had an exceptional year for early childhood care and education, which was made possible from the work of this commission and the advocates here in the room. To our lawmakers here today, thank you for working so closely with our administration on a bipartisan investment in early childhood. And the governor was grateful to be able to sign into law bipartisan bills focused on cutting red tape interfering with licensing and new sites opening, background check reforms, and simplifying processes for families to better participate. To Kathy and her team at the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation and Jenna Conway and her amazing team at the department, thank you for your partnership and laser focus on what's best for our earliest learners. Governor Youngkin remains committed to furthering the goals and vision of building blocks for Virginia families to ensure that families can choose the early option that best supports their children and enter school ready to learn. Now, the role of this Early Childhood Care and Education Commission is more critical than ever. We know that our youth that have been born into 2024 represent Generation Alpha. So I just want to spend a minute to talk about those traits before covering our roles and responsibilities. So this generation is the first to be born into a world in which the internet is truly wireless and absolutely ubiquitous. We also know from Jonathan Haidt and other researchers that their social skills are more impacted than prior generations, and they have shorter attention spans. This group has been described and will be the best educated generation, and will have a vastly different understanding of the world compared to their previous generations, because they are truly native to our universally connected world, exposed to different cultures, languages, and ideas from a very young age. Now, Gen Alpha kids are also known for adaptability to this rapidly changing world more than their older siblings. And more than prior generations, our Gen Alpha children tend to be independent learners and thinkers who are able to find information and solutions on their own. So I wanted to ground us in that because these traits are very unique to our youngest generation and are critical to keep in mind as we think about the needs to continue to innovate and support entrepreneurial leaders in the early childhood space, designing models around their needs and learning styles as our Commonwealth's future leaders. This commission was established to provide recommendations for and track progress on the financing of a comprehensive birth to 5 early childhood care and education system as established in the Code of Virginia, section 22.1-289.03, that provides stable, high-quality early childhood care and education services for families who need them the most, empowers parents with choices that meet their needs and preferences, and supports both school readiness and workforce participation. You have a handout right after your agenda that outlines these powers and duties, which I've consolidated. So one, our primary purpose here at the commission is to help expand access to and the quality of childcare options in all regions of the Commonwealth, really driven by parent demand. We are to analyze all existing and potential new opportunities for financing early childhood care and education programs with a focus on evidence-based outcomes. We are to retain, grow, and strengthen the early childhood care and education workforce with a focus on quality, to gather and use data and trends to determine needs and funding priorities for early childhood care and education focused on family choice, access, affordability, and quality. Annually report on specific expenditures, outcomes, and impact through programs like the Virginia Kindergarten Readiness Program, VQB5 classroom level assessment data, teacher retention data, and parental employment data. Support the development of early childhood longitudinal data to capture and link access, quality, and educator data with preschool growth and school readiness outcomes through 3rd grade, and to monitor and support ongoing research by the Virginia Department of Education, the University of Virginia, and the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation. It's all on your document, in case you didn't retain all of that. So we have more work to do together this year across public and private stakeholders. Now, Kathy said I could tee up a few components that the administration cares about and continues to care about in the spirit of building blocks for Virginia families. And so we are deeply committed to doing more to tackle childcare deserts, to ensure every family, no matter their zip code, has access to childcare options in their community. Preliminary work was done in the budget to pilot an early childhood infrastructure fund, but more is needed to establish a long-term infrastructure source to quickly retrofit excess government and higher education space for early childhood providers with a focus on tackling known childcare deserts. We've heard from new companies that are moving into Virginia that their need for childcare options and are excited to engage with the Foundation's new Shovel Ready initiative to help arm businesses with tools on how to support and scale childcare options and providers into their communities. We must create the infrastructure and opportunities to think differently about early childhood funding streams to minimize unforeseen impacts of funding or policy changes on the early childhood care sector and to enable more families in Virginia to have access to affordable childcare. The state general fund and federal government cannot be the sole investors in childcare options. And so we look forward to the commission continuing to evaluate ways to incent businesses, families, and community members to support childcare options in their communities. We've made great strides in educating families that are participating in state-funded programs about their public and private options, but more is needed to ensure every family in the Commonwealth can easily navigate and evaluate all their childcare options that best meet their needs, whether they receive state funding or not. And this will help ensure that more parents can continue in the workforce. We also know that red tape continues to interfere with entrepreneurial leaders' abilities to launch new childcare concepts quickly, think differently about staffing models, and be business ready day one. We absolutely trust that this commission, along with the work of the Department of Education and Virginia Early Childhood Foundation, will identify additional bureaucratic hoops that we can tackle that are currently interfering with scaling and expanding high quality early learning options and retaining our best early childhood educators. We look forward to participating in the commission discussions in the coming months and landing on viable bipartisan legislative proposals that can further the goals of building blocks for Virginia families together. With that, I would like to give the floor over to one of the Commonwealth's biggest champions for our earliest learners and educators, Delegate Carrie Coyner.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you, Deputy Secretary, for welcoming us back and reminding us of the important charge of this commission. It's good to be back together, yes? Several people said as they walked in today how great it was to come back together. I know Stacy came in with a big smile, ready to get to work. And together last year, we put a great foundation down for our efforts at the Early Childhood Commission. And we've made significant progress on behalf of Virginia children and families. I am so proud of what we have accomplished through the commission and look forward to building on those accomplishments with all of you to make our early child care system the best in the nation. So today we are going to work feverishly and fast and not waste a single minute. We will review the actions and activities over the last year, including a look at how the recommendations of our 2023 commission report compared to the current early childhood care education landscape. Thank you to a presentation from Dr. Coons, who's going to come up in just a moment. And then we're going to spend some time in small groups, and we will be looking at the progress, remaining gaps. We're going to look at new charges that have been assigned to the commission. We were assigned a whole lot of tasks out of this last General Assembly session, so we're going to have work to do there. We're going to learn about recent research from UVA and hear perspectives from our business, community, provider, and parent representatives. So before we get started, I wanted to point out a few things. One, feel free to get up, get water, get coffee. It's over here at the table. Restrooms are right out here to the door. We will do a quick break sometime around 11:30 for everyone to grab lunch and get right back in. And we are going to wrap up as close to 2 o'clock as possible, I promise. Everyone at your tables should have stacks of sticky notes in front of you. Those are there for you to continuously jot notes and weigh in with your ideas and thoughts as you listen to discussions and presentations today. Staff will float around as they have in previous meetings to pick those notes up to ensure they are incorporated into our collective insights from our time together. We have quite a few commission members participating virtually today. To our Zoom commission members, staff is monitoring the chat box at all times. So please use that chat box feature to drop your virtual sticky notes. They will convert them to sticky notes here in the room so that your thoughts are collected as well. So please be active on there. And then I get the daunting task of taking roll for all of us. So as I call your name, if you are here in the room, please say here. For our Zoom participants, you can either unmute and say here. We also need to know the location where you're zooming in from. If you'd prefer to type in the chat box here in your location, we can take that as well. So both of those are available. So starting off, we have Secretary Amy Gadara or her Deputy Secretary Emily Ann Gillickson.
Here.
Secretary Brian Slater or Billy Reed.
Here.
Dr. Lisa Coons.
Here.
Senator Evan.
Here.
Senator Luck. Senator Stanley. Senator Suderline.
Yes.
Delegate Bulova.
Here.
Delegate Cherry.
Here.
Delegate Hayes. Delegate Campbell.
Here.
Delegate Coiner. Here. Ashley Allen. Belinda Astrop.
Here, I'm zooming in from Greensville County.
Thank you, Belinda. Ellie Bracy. Jason Alcubi.
Here.
Simon Fiskus. Shakiba Frazier. Kathy Glazier.
Here, I'm zooming in from Danville, Virginia.
Thank you. Kathy Glazier.
Here.
Edmund Hughes.
Here.
Sonia Jones.
Here, I'm zooming in from Rocky Mount, Virginia.
Kristen Kane.
Here.
Todd Norris.
Here.
Nicholas Palacio. Stacy Parham.
Here.
Benita Petrella.
Here.
John Saleh. Travis Staten.
Here.
Gary Thompson. Stacy Vance. Kevin Waddles. James Williams or his surrogate. Rachel Williams.
Here.
Elizabeth Winkle.
Here.
All right, we got through that. Great. Our Vice Chair, Gary Thompson, is not able to join us today as he's has had a family emergency. And so I'll be standing in for him. So you're going to have to hear a little bit more of my voice up front. I would encourage you, the team also put notepads on the table. If you aren't ready for those sticky notes, if you want to actively listen, I think it will be helpful as I list some of the things that both the governor and our commission was hoping we would see in our final outcome from our legislative session, that you may make some notes of what we thought we would work on and what we got. So that might be helpful for that gap discussion later. So I encourage you to actively listen as I share some of where we've been over this last year. In December 2023, at the first budget event of the season, Governor Glenn Youngkin announced the building blocks for Virginia Families Initiative. I know many of you were there. It was an exciting day. We had all those little kids who were there singing, and it was such a great time. Building blocks empowers parents with childcare choice, reduces red tape, expands available childcare options for parents, and provides needed support for parents to continue in the workforce through providing significant investment in early childhood care and education. In the governor's announcement, he noted that the commission created a series of guiding principles and recommendations which informed the development of the building blocks for Virginia Families' approach. Funding included in the governor's introduced biennial budget focused on ensuring every low-income working family who currently receives public support continues to have access to early childhood and after-school programs by providing over $448 million in total investment. This is $185 million per year in new funding. Specific proposed funding included the following: $213 million in fiscal year 25 and $237 million in fiscal year 26 for the child care subsidy program. $36.5 million each year for the mixed delivery program, $149.7 million in fiscal year 25 and $148.4 million in fiscal year 26 for the Virginia Preschool Initiative, $25 million in fiscal year 25 for a new early learning capital investments fund, a competitive grant fund to increase supply of quality early childhood care and education programs in child care deserts, $1 million in fiscal year 25 for a digital wallet pilot. This was a platform to facilitate childcare cost sharing, and $20 million for recognized B5 teacher incentive program. So hopefully you heard in there some of the things that we made as priorities that were in his proposed priorities as well. The significant investments included in the governor's budget provided a critical baseline and really a running start for continued budget development by those of us in the legislature. The 2024 General Assembly was a busy and historic session for early childhood care and education. With resounding bipartisan support, the final budget approved by the legislature and signed by Governor Youngkin in May provides over $1.1 billion for early childhood care and education services, including historic general fund investments of $366 million in fiscal year 25 and $461 million in fiscal year 26. Highlights include $390.6 million in fiscal year 25 and $424.9 million in fiscal year 26 in state and federal funding to provide child care subsidy program slots for more than 42,719 children in fiscal year 25 and 45,159 children in fiscal year 26. $38.8 million in state funding each year to serve 2,530 children in the mixed delivery program, $157.6 million in fiscal year 25, and $156.3 million in fiscal year 26 in state funding for the Virginia Preschool Initiative. The final budget also included $1 million in fiscal year 25 for an MOU with Reynolds Community College to establish a child care facility for the benefit of state employees in Richmond, with a report due to provide recommendations on utilizing additional state resources for retrofitting spaces at other community college campuses across the Commonwealth. A new charge for the commission was included in budget language. The Early Childhood Care and Education Commission shall review and recommend updates to the current co-payment schedule, parental work requirements, and attendance expectations applicable to the Child Care Subsidy Program and Mixed Delivery Grant Program. In addition to delivering historic investments in early childhood care and education, over 30 bills related to early childhood care and education were introduced by members in the House and Senate. There were also 50 early childhood care and education member-sponsored amendments proposed to the introduced budget. So when I say we had a really busy legislative session, I meant it. This record number of proposals demonstrates the growing interest and recognition of the value of a strong private-public partnership for early childhood care and education. Two bills that passed that are related to priorities of the commission include House Bill 1277, sponsored by myself and Delegate Laufer, which provides provisional hiring so childcare providers can hire staff more quickly. House Bill 419 and Senate Bill 54, sponsored by Commission members Senator Mamie Locke and Delegate David Bulova, ensure sustainable, stable funding that is responsive to parent demand, requiring the VDOE to report funding needs based on cost of quality formula annually. Important to note, the original version of the bill also proposed the creation of a non-reverting fund to facilitate funding flexibility and responsiveness. Unfortunately, the language establishing the non-reverting fund was removed from the final bill, but the flexibility and protection it provides remain important to Virginia's ability to respond to parent demand, and so will remain part of our ongoing conversations here at the Commission. In summary, there has been tremendous progress and thoughtful, deliberate action taken in Virginia's bipartisan leaders to ensure the Commonwealth's children, families, businesses, and communities can be successful. Historic bipartisan investments averted a child care crisis, fiscal cliff, and preserved services for tens of thousands of children and families. However, the demand for child care services continues to grow across the Commonwealth, outpacing investments and generating waitlists for families, and we still have many child care deserts throughout the Commonwealth. So while there is much to celebrate and be proud and thankful for, there is a lot of work still left to be done. And so this group is going to be extremely important in our continued efforts to help guide and give recommendations to both the governor and the legislature moving forward. Next up, I am excited to welcome Dr. Lisa Coons to the stage. She is going to help us understand whether and how the recommendations from the Commission's Fall 2023 report were addressed and the 2024 session. Welcome, Dr. Kings. Good morning. Good morning on this rainy July. I hope everybody made it in okay. I am Lisa Kuhn, State Superintendent of Public Instruction. I am pleased to be here and discussing such an important topic for our education system. We know our earliest children need a great start, so I'm honored to work side by side with Jenna Conway and her team in this initiative. Before I begin, though, I'd like to thank the elected officials who are here today and on Zoom and thank you for elevating the importance of early childhood care and education. These legislators have worked with our administration to put in place a historic and bipartisan investment in early childhood in Virginia in the last year. I'd also like to thank the business leaders, the child care providers, and educators who are here today. I know how busy you are and how hard you work, so we appreciate you spending the entire day with us. Your participation helps make this work stronger, so thank you for making sacrifices that are necessary to be here. I also want to give a huge shout out to the DOE team who works really hard in the background, and Kathy Glazier to make this happen, so thank you for all of your hard work. Today, I have the honor of providing a status update on what has been done and accomplished since we were here last year. I will first provide a brief overview of our deliverables from last year, our shared vision, our guiding principles, and our 8 key strategies. Then I'm going to walk you through the highlights of what we have accomplished in response to those recommendations. You have a handout in your folder that provides a detailed chart on each strategy, recommendation, and each of those activities. I'm just going to focus on the highlights because there's no way I can talk through all of the accomplishments, which is a pretty cool, amazing thing, right? We've done so much that I can't chat about it up here. Incredibly proud of all these things that are happening for early childhood in Virginia. So let's start by reviewing last year's work. In 2023, the new Commission on Early Childhood Care and Education convened to produce recommendations for Virginia's public-private birth to 5 early childhood care and education system. On several months, the Commission met, heard from national experts, spent hours discussing Virginia's unique system that includes a variety of options, including family childcare, Head Start, early childhood special education, and school-based preschool. The Commission discussed the broader transformation of Virginia's system, shifting from a system that is governed across multiple entities to one that is unified under the Department of Education. They learned how Virginia was taking bold steps to measure every classroom that takes public funds, enabling better supports and empowering families with better information about those options. This is so important so families can understand and trust the options that are available to them. In turn, they can go to work and pursue greater self-sufficiency, building better lives for themselves and for their children. Even though there are very different ideas and different approaches, the Commonwealth ultimately came together around a shared vision, which is a Virginia where every child and all children have the opportunity to enter school ready. I'm going to give us a reminder on our guiding principles. In the report, the Commission set forth 6 guiding principles: access and choice. Parents must have quality options, data, and information to choose quality care and the ability to pay for their child's care. Virginia will continue to fund children, not systems. Affordability. Families should contribute to childcare costs based on a sliding scale according to household income so that they can choose high-quality options and we can sustain our system. Quality educator workforce. Early childhood programs should have the resources to deliver engaging learning experiences that ensure school readiness. Virginia should support the workforce to grow and deepen ability to impact and deliver quality early learning experiences. Our public-private partnership. Employers must be an active part of the solution, including but not limiting to help covering the cost of childcare to their employees. Government and business partnerships help develop and implement innovative solutions that are nimble, cost-efficient, and demonstrate impact. Full community participation. Local governments and communities have a vested interest in the success of our children and must contribute to solutions to fit their own community's needs. And last but not least, accountability. Quality and transparent data must be used to effectively support parent decisions and to ensure that all childcare focuses on early learning. Throughout its meetings in 2023, the Commission discussed multiple strategies that Virginia could employ to sustain and strengthen its best-in-class early childhood system. Commission members broke into small groups and refined ideas, resulting in a set of thoughtful strategic priorities. In its report, the Commission put forth a call to action with 8 key strategies. The 8 exciting and ambitious strategies are included here. I could read all day, but I'm going to keep going. So we're going to talk about what Virginia has done and accomplished since the last time the Commission met. As you will see, a lot is happening here. To keep us moving, we are going to look on our data, at our data on slide. We are really having fun with the technology. We're going to look at the data that our early childhood system has used to drive data decision-making at every level of the system. I just want to take a minute. I have the opportunity to be with many other state leaders and talk about early childhood systems. 2 weeks ago, I was in DC with several early childhood leaders, and they're looking towards us and our data system. And sometimes we have to take a moment and pause about the great work. This is amazing work. The amount of data, the data is collected, the transparency of the data is really impressive. So I want to take a moment and just highlight the fact that Virginia is unique. There are many states looking at the data we collect, how we built our data system, and the transparency around our data. I know a lot of times we get in the weeds, get into Virginia, get what we're doing, but it's a real moment to highlight this is special, and this is really well recognized across the nation. So Virginia should continue to build on the fundamentals of the early childhood system and the data-driven decision-making at every level that we currently have. As you see, our fundamentals are strong, including our nation-leading quality measurement and improvement system, VQB5 and accompanying data link B5. In fact, it's a strength of this system that helped lead to the historic investment. We will invest over $366 million in fiscal year 2025 and $461 million in FY26 in state fund slots in several key strategies to advance our best-in-class early learning system and to respond to the upcoming loss of one-time federal funding by building a viable approach for the future. We will ensure every low-income working family that currently receives public support continues to have access to early childhood and after-school programs, whether this is child care subsidy, mixed delivery, Head Start, and the preschool initiative. We will prioritize attendance across all publicly funded programs to enhance children's learning, support families to establish sound routines, and prepare children for kindergarten on day 1. We know that attendance matters in K-12, but we know that our great routines and start with our earliest children. We will make sure that this investment is sustainable and that families are invested in contributing to establishing consistent, affordable copays on a sliding scale. And we will ensure families understand what they're investing in by providing an online, one-stop VQB5 portal that provides information about health, safety, and learning for all public childcare options. But that's not all. Let's move on to the next slide to talk about the increasing role of business and public-private partnerships. Maybe. I think, there we go. Thank you. The Commission recommended that we think beyond government when we consider the future of early childhood. You all recognize early childhood care and education as an economic development, and you recommended that Virginia should support business to play a larger role, pilot innovations, and strengthen public-private partnerships. As you see, this recommendation has inspired a lot of actions. Cost-sharing opportunities.
or employers will provide funds towards childcare to help them make it more affordable for their employees. Digital wallets for families, businesses, and philanthropy to contribute towards the cost of early childhood care and education. And as a proud Mimi of a little one in Virginia Beach who's going to be going, I cannot wait for this wallet. I just have to say that. And a child care supply building to more deeply engage Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development associations. In addition, business leaders are convening and exploring out-of-the-box approaches to increasing the supply of childcare and better positioning early childhood as the economic development lever that it can be in all areas of the state. Doing this will also take removing all the barriers that exist for businesses and others. Let's move on to the next slide to discuss efforts to streamline regulations and address ongoing workforce challenges. To maximize the potential of business innovations and public-private partnerships, Virginia must consider its regulatory and early childhood care education workforce landscape. Virginia should continue to strive to make it easier for providers to serve families by common sense streamlining of regulations, zoning, and permitting. As we often hear from providers, including folks in this room, we must explore and test every possible strategy to address the persistent work challenges that limit how much childcare is available, even when there are available facilities. We've made solid progress in that area since you all made these recommendations, including passing several laws. As you see here, Governor Youngkin has signed into law several important pieces of legislation, including laws to provide additional flexibility for provisionally hiring new teachers to address shortages, empower localities to reduce zoning and regulatory barriers, and exempting certain providers from redundant licensure. In addition, the commission put forth recommendations about the importance of our educator workforce. In response, Virginia will invest $20 million in recognized B5 to attract and retain educators in childcare and family childcare who have dedicated themselves to teaching our littlest learners. These incentives have been cited as a national model and that have been shown to reduce teacher shortages and increase educator retention in childcare. We will continue to strengthen and scale innovations such as Fast Track to attain and retain talent, as well as maintain $1 million in scholarship programming to increase the skills of Virginia's early education workforce. This is the workforce that supports our workforce, and we have to solve this crisis. Because working families depend on the workforce, this workforce and early childhood care and the consistency of our employees showing up at our childcare facilities, we need to lean in on this important initiative and continue to focus on developing our early childhood care workforce. We've also saved the best for last. We want to make sure that our families have choices and that our families' first and most important choice is where they choose to send their children. Virginia is building a nationally recognized public-private parent choice system. This means that funding should follow the child where the family wants the child to go, not just the system. And it should reflect those parent preferences. As you see here, Virginia continues to make progress in the area too. Our state passed a budget and laws to use state dollars to fund all current public slots, even as hundreds of millions of federal dollars went away. The new budget and laws also call for ensuring this practice continues and that we are transparent about parental demand and preference, using wait lists to better understand unmet demand and reallocating unused dollars to support parent choice. We know parents choose all types of setting, including family childcare, so we have to ensure it is a level playing field for choice, including providing additional supports to those family childcare small businesses that often are the most affordable and familiar care in early education. I could talk on and on and on about the great work of early childcare. It is so important to the work we do at the Department of Education, and it's so important for our families and for the ecosystem of Virginia. But I want to most importantly say thank you, because each of you in this room and on the screen are helping us continue to make these successes for our families and continuing to improve those opportunities. It's impressive to see everything that we've done, and we should all be really proud because we are sitting in a place as a state that many states are not there. I'm proud to be a part of this work and proud to be a Virginian, and it speaks to the power of this Commonwealth and this commission and shows our contributions are continuing to shape how we govern, finance, support, and measure the successes of our early child care system. But of course, there is always more work to be done, and that's where you come back in. Now we're going to roll up our sleeves and get ready to start sharing our insights. I think I am turning this over to Delegate Coiner.
And we are ahead of schedule, which is a beautiful thing, not to be running late. Thank you, Dr. Coons, for that update and really giving us a great visual of the things that we've accomplished in 2023 together. So we are now going to transition to a small group activity to reflect and respond to the progress made over the last several months. Those Post-it notes and markers on your table, everybody needs some. So somebody with the biggest type A personality at your table, grab those and start giving them to people and tell them they have to write things down. So here comes the assignment, and I'm going to change it just a little bit, add to it. So on your agenda for the day, these questions are actually also on there. So if the big screen you'd rather not stare at, it's on your agenda as well. But I'd like you individually, just by yourself, to spend about 10 minutes. I'll tell you when the time is up, to focus on a few questions and jot each answer on different sticky notes so that we have all of those. The first question I'd like you to think about and use those sticky notes for: which accomplishments are most significant from your perspective? Which accomplishments are most significant from your perspective? So the example that I'll give that's going to be on one of my sticky notes, Zoom people, use the chat box, please, for yours. For me, it was that we avoided the crisis of losing slots for kids that were already in childcare. So that would be one of the things I'm going to list on my sticky notes. An accomplishment was that no child who is currently receiving childcare education services had to leave. The second question for sticky notes: what gaps are most critical for the commission to next address? What gaps are most critical for the commission to next address? So one of those for me, for example, would be our childcare deserts, right? That's still a gap. So that would be on my sticky note, just to give you an example. And then I'm going to change this last one and give you a little bit more work. From your perspective, has the commission thus far made progress with its charge? Don't be like my high school kids and put yes or no on your sticky note. The expectation is more than what my high school child would give me as an answer. So elaborate in your own words. You have all three of these great guiding documents that were in your packet that you can use for reference point. But what I'd also ask you to add to this question, the progress made with its charge, if you could list your top three, maybe disappointments, right? Things that we thought we would get to and we didn't, right? So maybe the top three things that you wish we had seen more progress on in the legislative session. So for me, I'm going to go to that $25 million in that capital investment. Because for my particular community, that was one that people who needed childcare facility startup money, they were willing to start a place, but they didn't have a facility, right? So that for me is going to be one of the things that we said was important to us, but we didn't get. So while you say, if your answer is yes, have we made progress? Please describe it in your own words, what that progress looked like for you, but then maybe something that we didn't make progress on that you thought was a priority. Good? All right, 10 minutes, everybody, on your own. Then we'll move on to the second part, which involves group activity. So 10 minutes on your own writing. Start with our report outs. Hopefully that gives our Zoom folks time to decide who's presenting. Zoom team will do you last so that you can hear everybody else first. And we will start with the red table. Who is the red table who wants to come up to the microphone and report out?
Broader than me, sir. Already understood.
Delegate Bulova, who did you select from your red table?
Sorry.
Yeah, you can grab a microphone and.
I was still taking notes.
I mean, that's what my
Sorry.
answer reduced costs.
Okay. All right. So accomplishments, number one, funding. Huge nod once again to the lawmakers in the room. We know that there were lots of policy reform wins, but that doesn't matter if we didn't have the funding on the table. So also the shift in where it is located in the budget, we felt like was significant. If you're a finance nerd, it's definitely making it a one-stop location on all things early childhood. Codifying parent choice and demand, top accomplishment. Streamlining regulations, especially for educators, was a big plug at our table. And then also just the growing business community leadership. There's more to do, but we definitely gave a nod that Virginia is ahead of a lot of other states in regards to action and leadership. Gaps, access to quality childcare is still not even. Lots of conversation about the infrastructure barriers and how do you get key champions for that issue. I gave a nod that a lot of lawmakers reached out post-budget with questions on how to access that fund. And so I think there's ripe opportunity, but also access in regards to educators. We have a lot of pilots going on and lessons, but we said more cohesion is needed. How do we take those best practices and simplify ways, especially for private funding streams, so that we have stability long-term? Obviously great investments, but we want to still make sure that philanthropy, business are able to contribute and help. Also building capacity, so shout out to the work that's going on, but Business 101 operations support is real. And so excited to learn those best lessons. We did give a nod that there's still a gap in regards to families with students with special needs or disabilities facing greater gaps to having the same level of choices as other families. And then continuing to ensure that silos of funding and data are more cohesive and brought forth, especially with the focus on parent demand. Yes, to the last one, huge progress, especially with bipartisan charge and focus. So thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Great job, red table, leading us off, green table. Thank you, Senator, for stepping up and being your advocate for green
Sure.
table.
So on the accomplishment front, one of the things that there was a lot of excitement at our table about was the VQB5 services and seeing that having progress and growth in their own school. So that was something there was excitement about. Also, the MOU between J. Sergeant Reynolds and providers, and hope that there would be more of that. And obviously the money's huge. The gaps that were recognized at our table were that so many of the financial resources obviously go exclusively to folks that accept state funds. And so with providers that still need the benefits of continuing education and growth there, if we could do more to provide that to the folks that don't directly accept the funds. One of the other concerns that was expressed at our table is the current proposed regulation that would remove the grandfathering on the space requirements. At one of the schools provided at our table, if it was removed, meaning that you no longer can continue with the space requirements as they existed prior to 2008, that would mean that they would lose 1/3 of their capacity. So that's one of the concerns they have going forward. Obviously, the lack of the deserts, especially in rural areas, is a great concern. How do we do that outside of just, especially in several rural areas, they're only provided in the town, in the county, which, you know, they have the density there like lots of other places. The problem is elsewhere. And we believe that there's been a lot of progress, and again, definitely highlighting the money. But again, those services to that individual school were very helpful.
Thank you. Great job, green table. Blue table, who's your spokesperson?
It's me.
Let's got it.
All right. Let me just, so my back's not to people. I left my, see, I'm on like 4 different, I was scribbling notes. Thank you very much, Mike. All right. So I think for accomplishments, many of the same. Number one, we avoided the fiscal cliff and we avoided that funding gap, which was really important. We removed red tape as it related to licensure and background checks, which we thought was really important. The digital wallet was a critical success. Our data systems, convening of businesses and just really focusing on that economic development link. The tri-share pilot of mixed delivery and being able to push existing funds further. Sorry, I can't read my writing here. All right, in terms of, we sort of addressed the gaps and question 2 and question 3. So I think it was a resounding yes, we've made progress, but the gaps continue. And the gaps are caregiver pipeline. One of the specific areas is we front-loaded bonuses in fiscal year 25. And the question is what happens in fiscal year 26? There's an opportunity for us to expand Teachers for Tomorrow, really linking and addressing some of the barriers, particularly around regulations. Community participation, particularly in childcare deserts. We have sort of feast and famine. We have really strong community engagement in some areas and not in others. And one of the conversations we had at the table is, how do we define what good community participation looks like? Because if we define it, we can start measuring it. The business partnership is lacking, and we need to be able to do more. Sustainability in the long term, specifically funding. You know, we're good for the next 2 years, then what? We want to be able to connect the data to the ability to work. So we need to measure the impact on workforce and economic development. And we want to address the supply side because, you know, while we are making improvements, we're not keeping pace with demand. And we had a lot more on the supply side, but I'll hold that for later maybe.
Great, thank you. Yellow table.
Probably need my glasses. So like everyone, the funding, the investment, you know, that's really critical. It's huge. And it's a record. So data collection, the Reynolds Community College project, engaging more with the business community, quick hire, the money following the child. We think that that's really important. Support for opening new centers, the digital wallet, and this was a bipartisan legislation that came out of this. We thought that was really important. There are still some gaps in access. We still have childcare deserts. Our workforce needs to be not only increased, but it needs to be stabilized. And startup costs still remain really hard for people to be able to break into the market. And also we'd like to see the process of subsidy expedited. So overall, we think we've made great progress because we listened to the voices of everyone and we gave clear, concise measures that we wanted to see would happen. And we're being looked at as a leader by other people in the country.
Thank you. All right, our Zoom group. If your spokesperson would unmute so that we can hear from you.
Left.
We're grading groups. Everybody has an A so far. All right, we'll try the Zoom group again maybe later if we get somebody back on audio. See people saying yes, no? All right, we'll wait on that. Well, great work by everybody in that exercise. I hope it helped hearing some of the same things that people felt were accomplishments, gave you some thoughts around gaps, as we have a lot of work to do to produce our next report to determine what our priorities are. And then also, I think it's really helpful to stay focused on the great progress while also recognizing that we have a lot more work to do. Sometimes we forget to take those moments to celebrate the great things that are happening. So we are going to move right into our next segment because we are ahead of schedule, which is exciting. So I'm going to invite my colleague, Delegate Bulova, to come on up, and he's going to get us started in our next activity.
Anyways, thank you very much, Delegate Coiner. It's nice to be up here because I'm going to go ahead and pile on the work, folks. Anyways, good morning, everybody. Really is nice to see everybody. And I can't tell you how heartening it is to be able to see how much progress that we've made since the last time that we went ahead and met. And I think as we've already expressed, a lot of that progress is a result of the commission. And I think it's really two things that the commission has done. Number one, it's laid out the compelling case for why we need to tackle these issues, why this is important, but also because we went through the process of actually putting together meaningful and actionable recommendations that were concise and that even members of the Virginia General Assembly could understand and put into law or into budget. That said, no good deed goes unpunished. And I say that term in the very best sense of the phrase. And so this is a really good thing that we are seen as leaders and we're being asked to go ahead and step up to the plate and even do more with respect to charting the course for early childhood education in Virginia. As we had heard, we had several bills, dozens of bills that were introduced to the General Assembly this year, and a number of those were passed and signed into law by the governor. Three bills in particular, though, were introduced by the House or in the House, but did not pass due to fiscal or other constraints or policy considerations. However, there was enough interest in those bills, in those concepts, that the House Appropriations Committee decided that we would opt to send those to the commission to review and provide recommendations back to the General Assembly. And so in particular, Chairman Torian, in putting together that letter, asked the commission to give very careful consideration to the fiscal and policy implementation or implications of the bills. I think the most important charge, though, was that he asked us to prioritize recommendations given financial constraints. And so I know we talked a lot about the fiscal win that we had this year with regard to funding. This was actually a pretty spectacular year in that we've been planning for a decline in revenue for years that has not materialized. And that has allowed us really to move forward in some really great ways. But I think we're also proud in Virginia that we are a fiscally conservative state. And so it's really important that as we're putting together policy considerations that have budgetary impacts, and all three of these bills do, that we are helping to prioritize so that the Senate, House or Senate Finance and Appropriations, and then House Appropriations get a sense of if we can pass only one of these or two of these, what is the most important with respect to moving the ball forward. So what I wanted to do is provide just a really brief overview of what these three bills do. The first bill is House Bill 372. And so this is a bill from Delegate Marty Martinez. What this bill would do is establish the Child Care Implementation and Substitute Employee Pool Grant Fund Program. Our first task will be to shorten that name so that it's not quite such a mouthful. But under the program, any existing child care provider or group of providers could apply for a competitive grant to establish and or implement a substitute employee pool to ensure efficient and effective staffing with qualified employees. The second bill is House Bill 409 from Delegate Phil Hernandez. This bill proposes to change the way that childcare providers are reimbursed through the child care subsidy program. And specifically, what this bill would do is shift away from the attendance-based reimbursement model and instead use the enrollment-based model. And so if you recall, this is an issue that was highlighted in the 2023 JLARC report as being important to provide stable and predictable funding for childcare programs. It's really the same kind of model that is currently used for private pay families. And then finally is House Bill 627. And so this was a bill that was introduced by Delegate Elizabeth Bennett Parker. What this bill would do is provide eligible childcare workers with free childcare through the childcare subsidy program. And so as she was explaining to me, while many childcare workers are eligible for the subsidy due to their low pay, the issue that she is trying to address is that a lot of providers have incomes that are just above that subsidy level. And so as a result, because of low pay, they continue to struggle to afford their own childcare for their children, especially when you look at high cost of living areas of the Commonwealth. And so what she envisioned is that such a program would provide a strong recruitment and retention tool for childcare programs. Several other states, including Kentucky and Rhode Island, have implemented such programs or are considering such programs. And so in terms of timing for the bills and getting our recommendations back to Chairman Torian, he's requested the commission include the results of our review in our October 1 annual report. So we got plenty of time, folks, a couple months at least. And then another famous quote is, "But wait, there is more." And so actually, Chair Coiner went ahead and touched on this very briefly, but just remember that in addition to these very three specific bill referrals, the budget that we adopted by the General Assembly also included language directing the commission to review and recommend updates to the child care subsidy program and mixed delivery grant programs on 3 issues. And so these were really important ones where you've got policy nuances, and we're going to need to be able to work through these things to figure out what the funding is going to be and how we're going to make sure that we have sustainable program in the long term. And so 1 is the co-payment schedule, 2 deals with parental work requirements, and 3 deals with attendance expectations. And for each of these, the budget asks us that we include consideration of fairness to the families, but also recognition, again, that we need to understand the impacts and manage the impacts on our general fund. And for this, we've got a little extra time that we're able to work through the issues. And so the budget requires us to submit a report of our recommendations related to the budget language no later than December 1, 2025. And so with these additional tasks, right, on top of the larger issues, right? So last year, it was kind of no holds bar. We had a relatively broad mandate and we can kind of dive in. That broad mandate has not gone away, right? And so we're still expected to think outside the box and make recommendations for how we can build off of and strengthen our existing system. But on top of that, we have these additional tasks. And I really do think that that is emblematic of the strengths of the people that have been brought together to do this. As a result, though, that's going to be something that we're going to need to divide and conquer and make sure that we're breaking out into groups and dividing our responsibilities so that we can come back with policy recommendations. Some of these are going to require some detailed recommendations. And so there's going to be some homework that we're going to have to engage in outside of this group here. And so I'm going to turn things back over to our chair, Delegate Coiner, who is going to outline exactly how we are going to tackle these new challenges. So, thank you.
Can I ask a question before you leave?
Yes, sir. Senator Evans.
Maybe this is for Delegate Corner. I don't know if we need a microphone to people on Zoom. I was just wondering, with these 3 House bills, they probably each had a fiscal impact statement. So just as we consider them moving forward, it'd be good to know what they might end up costing.
So I don't know if you want to. Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, all of these made it through the respective policy committees, and then ultimately came to House Appropriations, where there's still policy considerations that we want to look through But ultimately, it's a matter of resource implications. And so I think for all of these, we want to look at the policy to ensure that that is solid policy moving forward. But I think to the other charge, we want to look at the cost effectiveness and also the prioritization of our resources. But yeah, those should be out there.
I think to Delegate Bulova's point, these were all good ideas for policy, right? They're all trying to solve problems, right? When employees want a break, that you have a substitute pool, that childcare staff members are struggling with some of the lower paying jobs and could use their own childcare provided as an incentive package. We heard from Stacy at our table that they're taking jobs at other places that have higher incentive programs or benefits packages. So to Delegate Bulova's point, they were all good ideas to solve problems, but they all come with really big fiscal impacts. And so part of our task from the chairman is to decide what is the most important thing, what would have the most benefit to our early childhood care and education program. So with that, with all of these big items, I'm recommending that we offer members the opportunity to volunteer to participate in small study groups, each focused on a specific area of exploration. So you have at each table a sheet that lists each of the bills and the topics, and there's 5 slots. Typically, these groups would be made up of 3 members from different roles or perspectives, right? So we want diversity and thought in these groups, and each will be staffed by a VECF or VDOE team member. So you won't be left to figure out how to put your final product together. You're going to have help in doing that. We need your thinking and your brains. The responsibilities for each of these study groups will be to convene virtually to review information, hear from relevant constituents, and form suggestions for the commission to consider in one of our future meetings this year. I'd estimate that the study groups will likely need to attend up to 3 virtual meetings. You may be able to work everything out in one. We don't know, but I would say anticipate at least up to 3 possible virtual meetings. And then your work would conclude with a presentation of your group's findings to the full commission. And so I'm going to outline the groups that are listed on your table. Group 1 will address House Bill 372 from Delegate Martinez relating to the establishment of the long name. Part of your task is consolidating that name of the Child Care Implementation and Substitute Employee Pool Grant Fund Program. That's Group 1. And there's a copy of the bills on your table as well. So if you want, while we're taking the break for lunch, I'm going to actually give you the time to sign up and to review. So you can review those copies. There's better description. And if you have questions about the bill in more detail and what happened, you can talk to House members. Delegate Cherry is on education, and you have a House of Probes members who are here, and VDOE staff.
So I can tell you whether they were passed or not passed or.
Thank you, Delegate Cherry. He's our scribe for looking these up. So use the time at our break for lunch to ask questions if you're hesitant about which group to sign up for. Group 2 will address House Bill 408 from Delegate Hernandez relating to reimbursements for child care subsidy program providers. Group 3 will address House Bill 627 from Delegate Bennett Parker relating to expanding the child care subsidy program eligibility to employees of licensed child care providers. Group 4 will address the commission's work to review and recommend updates to the current co-payment schedule, parental work requirements, and attendance expectations applicable to the Child Care Subsidy Program and Mixed Delivery Grant Program. If you are interested in serving on one of these work groups, please list your name underneath them. The staff will collect this information, organize, and communicate back with you if you are requested to serve. I would note, if you are willing to serve on more than one of those groups, remember we need diversity of thought, so we can't have all of our delegates and senators in one work group. I'm using y'all as an example. If you're willing to serve on more than one, list your name more than once. So if we need to mix up the voices and groups, we have choices. So don't be afraid. If you're willing to do all of them and it doesn't matter to you, you're willing to be a voice in a work group, you can just write, I'd be in anywhere you need me to serve as a voice. So with that, lunch is here. We are going to take a 15-minute break in order for folks to look over the bills at your table. I know Delegate Bulova is willing to answer questions about the bills and budget items. If anybody before you sign up has questions, Delegate Cherry looked up what happened to each of those bills, so we don't have to use our memory. And we're able, you can ask questions for that. I'm happy to answer as well. As a reminder, lunches are for commission members and staff. I would ask that you take about the next 10 minutes to stretch your legs, grab your lunch and chat. And then if we could get back to our tables to sign up on those work groups. Our Zoom folks, if you would put in the chat box, if there's one of those groups that you would be willing to serve in, and our staff will make note of where you're willing to serve as well. For our Zoom members, we will get back together in 15 minutes, so you can take a break. Thanks, everybody.
Thank this commission for the work that it's doing. It is my pleasure to serve on this commission, but it's also my pleasure and my commitment in giving back to participate in the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation, because that investment in early childhood is critical for the future of our organization. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Travis Staten, the President CEO for EO Companies, and I'm sharing perspective from the business sector partnerships, particularly with Ballad Health in Southwest Virginia. As many of you are aware, Southwest Virginia is one of the more challenging areas of the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's unfortunate, before the pandemic, we had lots of supply issues, definitely labeled one of the deserts. There we go. However, there has been tremendous strides that have been made, and I want to share some of that as well as the work of the commission and on behalf of Ballad Health, how grateful and appreciative both Ballad as well as myself are in to participate with the commission and share our learnings with the work that is happening, but also benefit from learning where the state is heading as well. Thinking about what progress has been made, it is very exciting to the business community in Southwest Virginia because of the investments that is continuing to put early childhood and education front and center. Not only is it helping many families re-enter the workforce or become gainfully employed, it is one of the best investments in our future generation of tomorrow's worker, getting them prepared and ready for kindergarten. In addition to those investments at the state level, we have been striving to do that as well at the local level. So thinking about the true public-private partnerships, Ballad Health recently announced more than a year ago their intent to bring on 11 new centers throughout Southwest Virginia and Northeast Tennessee, accompanied by a $37.5 million investment. That speaks volume to their interest, to their acknowledgement, to their understanding about the importance of early childhood care and education, as well as economic value to our region and to our community. And make no mistake, that $37.5 million investment is not just for themselves and for their employees and their nurses and their doctors and members of the healthcare community, although they are one of the largest employers throughout our region, but they also have taken a real approach to make sure that their centers can serve additional families and additional employers and address additional needs and challenges. Again, coming from that perspective of having one of the largest gaps in access to care in Southwest Virginia. So through those public-private partnerships and through that investment, they are enabling additional centers to come online to not only serve their associates, but to serve low-income families, to serve vulnerable populations, and really doing some unique and innovative partnerships with Head Starts and mixed delivery, as well as VPI and several things for that innovation. And additionally, they're also working and championing the workforce recruitment and development. And not only are they going to be hiring a significant amount of teachers and educators in early childhood, they're also giving full benefits and medical insurance to those workers as well, which is extremely important, not just for, again, that we have access to care, but they're creating good jobs with livable wages in their network as well. Now, the challenges that we have moving forward, I know we've made significant progress in even funding the federal gap. But for so long, Southwest Virginia has had such a huge gap in care. Now we are adequately working to address those barriers and really bring on more supply in our region through this initiative and in these partnerships with the healthcare institutions. But at the same time, the demand continues to grow and continues to outpace what resources might be available for that, particularly looking in the arena of the subsidy area. A lot of our subsidy is maxed out, but we have not had enough subsidy providers. And now as we're bringing on more subsidy and making more opportunities available to those parents that want to work and want to support themselves, but may need that additional help, we're going to have some limitations on what we can do for those families due to just the potential pitfalls of constraints. So I think something for all of us to think about in the Commonwealth is as we continue to grow our investments and our resources to building that supply, we're also now enabling more capacity and more support for vulnerable populations and populations that would like to help themselves. And so making sure that we are continuing to monitor what resources are available, monitor those data points, and see what additional investments we can make as a Commonwealth to continue to flourish and thrive. So overall, the business community in Southwest Virginia is very excited about the administration's efforts. For too long, it has been one of the largest barriers for gainful employment in our region. Just looking at labor force participation data with the Board of Workforce Development last month, we're averaging about a 65% labor participation throughout the Commonwealth. Well, unfortunately, in Southwest Virginia, that tends to lag behind 10 points to 12 points, mostly due to the lack of access to early childhood and care. So continue to do the great work, continue to address the needs, and watch Southwest Virginia. We are digging out and climbing back and building that supply, but it will take public and private partnership in order to do that. One additional thing that we are extremely excited about as well is the work with mixed delivery and the pilot of the TriShare, which now will not only help that family, but also an employer will make an investment into that model in addition to the family, in addition to the subsidy from mixed delivery, which ultimately looks at that sliding fee scale, but it also has the potential to free up additional resources of state resources that now we can add another family or another individual to the network of subsidy care by everyone paying a little bit into that. So we're excited to see that pilot launch. We're excited to monitor and watch the data as we go along and be able to learn from that. But I think there's a lot of innovation and unique opportunities happening in our region. And again, kudos to Ballard Health for them stepping forward, making a huge investment into the early childhood care and education system, as well, working across both lines, both parties, both publicly and privately, in order to do what's best for our community. Thank you.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Now that I know my part in all of this and my place, it's great to be with y'all today. Really exciting to hear about the innovations that we've just heard about from some of the other speakers. I'm Jason Elkubi. I'm the CEO of the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. That's the Commonwealth's economic development organization. Some of you might be wondering why I'm here, and I get asked the question, why do I spend so much of my time and energy focusing on issues of early childhood education? The truth is, it's intrinsically important. We all know that. I think bottom line, that's why we are all here. It is intrinsically important, and it's intrinsically important to our future. But it's not hard to find a good excuse for connecting this to the state's economic development mission and our strategy. And I want to talk a little bit about that. I mean, I think it's important that we recognize that the investments that we're making, the work that we're doing today and in this broader context is really work that has a triple bottom line. Number one, it is one of the best ways that you can improve the success of the next generation, student success, preparing people for great education, productive lives. Secondly, it is a huge support to families. All families, and in particular, families where parents need to work and need to make sure that their kids have high quality, affordable, accessible childcare and education during the day. And then I think finally, the third part of that triple bottom line is it's great for communities. It's great for our Commonwealth. We provide families and kids what they need, but that also has some really nice spin-off effects like economic growth and vitality and so forth. There's a lot of good news here. We're making a lot of progress. We've got a lot of opportunities ahead. And I want to tell you all about something that I'm part of, that several folks are part of, that will help to connect the work that we're doing today and that will help to build on the momentum that we are experiencing. And that is just a few weeks ago, a week or so ago, we launched something called, it's a new task force. We call it the Shovel Ready Virginia Task Force. And this is all in the context of work that builds on the work of the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation, the work of the Virginia Business Roundtable for Early Education, our efforts here. And I've agreed with Mike Chin to be the co-chair of this task force. It includes, well, let me tell you what it is. Basically, in my own words, what this Shovel Ready Task Force is a way to recognize that we've got to connect the dots between sort of everything that's happened in Richmond and all the momentum, the funding, the policy. We've got to connect that better with what's happening on the ground, recognizing that we need to build some capacity, we need to build some understanding, and we need to respect, Travis, the fact that every region is a little bit different and they're doing it in their own ways. So the work of this task force will be overseen by a number of leaders that come from business, from economic development, workforce development, higher ed, philanthropy, and it will connect the dots with kind of operationalizing what's happening on the ground. We anticipate that at the end of the process, we will have a report. We will have worked with the 9 ready regions. Basically a report of recommendations, learnings. We anticipate delivering that report by the end of the calendar year. And envision this being sort of a playbook, a set of tactics, a way to capture some of the innovation that you just heard about in a way that makes it useful and usable to parts of the state that are trying to make the best use of these resources. I just want to say, I think getting this right, the impact of this is a tremendous opportunity for us and for Virginia's future, not just for economic development, but really to secure the kind of Commonwealth we want for the next generation. I believe in this so much that we have embraced at VDP the notion of making Virginia America's top state for talent. We've embraced that as part of our strategic plan. We know that if we can get this right, if we can get the talent piece right, if we can get education and workforce right, everything else we're trying to do in the economic development space is going to come so much more easily. I'm incredibly excited about this, happy to share it with you guys, and look forward to continuing this work.
And I know that Todd Norris of Ballad Health has been able to be in and out with us on Zoom, but I just want to recognize how great it is to have businesses who are working really hard to help find solutions for the childcare needs of their employees and really give us examples that we can use. And when folks are like, we don't know how to do it, we don't know what to do, that they open up their arms and are willing to have folks come and tour what they're doing and hear more about it. So a big thank you to Ballad Health for their part in ensuring that childcare needs are being met in Southwest Virginia. All right, the next portion of our meeting is on recent research. And so we are very fortunate to have Daphna Bosick of University of Virginia. with us. She is a professor of education and public policy and associate director of Ed Policy Works at the University of Virginia. Her research addresses early childhood education policy with a focus on efforts to improve early childhood systems at scale. That's really important for us. She is particularly interested in policies aimed at supporting the early childhood workforce. Currently, she is leading the multi-year evaluation of Virginia's federal preschool development grant Birth to Five initiative, which aims to expand access to stable, affordable, and quality early education for Virginia's families and children, particularly those who are most vulnerable. We are pleased to welcome Daphna today to provide us with some perspectives on Virginia's early childhood care and education system.
Hello. All right, that worked. So it is a pleasure to get to come to speak to your group again and talk more about the work that our team at UVA, which is called ECCE Partnerships, the study of early education through partnerships, has been doing in collaboration with the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation, as well as the Virginia Department of Education, towards trying to build better early childhood systems statewide in the Commonwealth. And what my role has been as the kind of head of the evaluation team is to think about how we can collect and use data that can help us better understand the landscape in Virginia, and then think about how we can better understand problems we're facing, try innovative solutions, and then test to see if things are improving over time. So use research to track progress and inform decision-making in partnership with VDOE and VECF. And what I'm going to talk about today is kind of the ways in which, through our partnership, I've been working with VDOE and VECF since around 2019 on efforts to improve the early childhood systems here. And through that work, I have gotten sort of a close look at the ways in which Virginia's approaches to early childhood really differ from a lot of other states, and ways in which we've become sort of innovators. And so I wanted to sort of highlight how Virginia has been tackling three of the biggest challenges that are facing all states in the country right now with early childhood, highlight the kind of innovation that we've been making, and then sort of highlight where we are and next steps that are needed. But to organize, I kind of wanted to begin by highlighting what some of the key challenges are in improving early childhood education. So for a lot of you all, this will not be sort of news, but to sort of structure the talk, one of the big challenges in early childhood education is the highly fragmented nature of the early childhood system. If we think about how we organize K-12 in Virginia and around the United States, most children in K-12 are participating in the public school systems. And we have lots of young children interacting with publicly funded early childhood options, but it is through a whole variety of programs and systems, whether it's a publicly funded pre-kindergarten spot, a Head Start spot, or childcare in a subsidized private program or a home-based care. And these programs have totally different histories. As you know, they have totally different historical goals, funding levels, definitions of quality. And so as states around the country are trying to make better early childhood programs for kids and families, they're often faced by the very different ways in which these programs are regulated, funded, supported, and how to bring them together into a cohesive system. So that's one really big challenge, is the historical fragmentation of the system. And then another one that is definitely not news to you all is that childcare in particular, which is one part of that fragmented early childhood system, is often too expensive for families to afford who need it in order to work and support going to school. And while it is too expensive for those families, it is simultaneously not enough resources to run the programs in a way that supports high quality learning opportunities for the kids that are stable. And so it's simultaneously too expensive and not funded high enough in order to provide quality. And that is probably the biggest challenge with early childhood right now around the country. And then a third challenge that is very salient to me as a researcher, but also very salient to our partners here in Virginia, is that in general, and due to the fragmentation, we typically have almost no data on early childhood systems. And that might seem kind of like a nerdy research problem, but it's actually a big policy problem, because we often don't know basic things around how many children do have access, how many kids don't have access. Is it full day access? Are they getting the supports that their families need in order to work? What does it cost? We know very little about the actual workforce of, well, how much teacher turnover is there and how many sites are shutting down because they can't find teachers to staff classes. And without data to understand those problems, it's really hard to solve those problems and to track whether the various kinds of investments we might want to make are yielding the results we want. And so you all have been talking about different strategies. We want to be able to test them, see, did that have the impact we want? If not, what do we need to change? But nationwide, there's very little data that can allow states to do that. So those are three of what I would say are like the biggest problems nationwide in early childhood. And in the talk, whoa, that did not show up how it was supposed to. So sorry that the print is so large. But in the talk, what I wanted to highlight is three really big innovations that Virginia has made to address these problems. And though they are too big to read right in this moment, I will talk through them. But in all three of those buckets, the coordination of a fragmented system, the efforts to improve the funding and the quality, and the efforts to build data systems that allow us to understand problems and track improvement, Virginia has made really unique innovations that other states are sort of turning to and watching. So I will sort of highlight two innovations in each of these three buckets throughout the talk, and then later I think there'll be time to answer questions or discuss further. So the first bucket was around this issue of fragmentation. And I wanted to highlight some of the major changes that Virginia made in order to sort of bring together a fragmented system into a much more cohesive, coordinated system. All right, so as I kind of mentioned, nationwide publicly funded early childhood programs are extremely disconnected. You have the child care subsidy system that was originally funded as a work support for working women, which tends to have a focus on just keeping children safe throughout the day, but less of a focus on children's development, children's learning, the readiness you all talked about for kindergarten and beyond. And very different sort of quality regulations federally than you see in other early childhood programs. We have Head Start, which has kind of a broader historical goal of supporting low-income children and families with very much a focus on developmental support so kids can start ready, but also a broad family goal of supporting low-income families. And then school-based pre-kindergarten programs, which are kind of on the other side. They are less focused on work supports for families. They are part-day programs. They tend to not go in the summer. They tend to not serve the youngest children, 0 to 3, but they're highly focused on supporting kids' learning. They have teachers that tend to have the same credentials as teachers in public school systems. So really a wide spectrum of programs with quite different goals, quite different funding levels, quite different regulations. And so the first kind of innovation that Virginia sort of enacted was to say, like, we are going to stop thinking about the early childhood systems that we have for 0 to 5 as sort of a set of disparate programs with disparate goals, and instead start thinking about them as one system that needs to operate functionally together. And so when you look at Virginia's vision for what they want, there is a lot of language that is all about kind of cohesion, all children having the opportunities. And here we're talking about all kids birth through 5, whether they're a 4-year-old or an infant, all early childhood programs, whether it's a family child care home, a Head Start, a pre-K, and the idea of unification. And so this sounds really good. Virginia did a lot to make it more than just kind of an ideal of what we want. There was a lot of very concrete changes made to make that really happen. The first of which was the consolidating of early childhood in the Virginia Department of Education. And so historically in the country, it is much more typical to have childcare being run through a social service agency pre-K running through the Department of Education and Head Start sort of moving across as a federal program sort of separately. Often it's not the same leaders who are managing those programs. And therefore, even when they are all trying to do good things, they are often developing policies and practices in a way where there are unintended consequences. For instance, a program, an investment in supporting pre-K can have a lot of unintended consequences for the childcare sector, who relies on serving 3 and 4-year-olds for a lot of their resources. When you have 2 different agencies running that, it's really easy to get that wrong, improving one program while sort of hurting a whole other sector. Putting them in one agency that can sort of think system-wide is a huge innovation for trying to have shared goals and shared definitions of what we're going to talk of what we are moving towards, what the sort of North Star is. And in Virginia, and I'll talk about this more, a big piece of that was coming together around a shared idea of goals and about a shared idea of quality, and the idea that all children need engaging programs and all families need programs that support their work needs. And so the idea of bringing that all together into a single agency that can think about it cohesively was one of the big innovations. And there have been other states who have tried to do something similar to this, either putting all early childhood into a single agency or forming a whole new agency for early childhood to work across groups. And some of that has been important structural changes, but what's more important than like bringing it all together is what happens next to ensure that you're not just doing this in name and keeping sort of these 3 fragmented programs doing their own thing and actually bringing them together. So there's a few other sort of concrete changes that Virginia made that made this more than just the move to the Department of Ed and more around kind of a shared cohesive vision. One of the main ones that I think has come up already today was sort of the building of ready regions, which said we're not just trying to build this cohesion at the state level and saying that the state level decision-making is going to come from one agency. We know that the actual work of meeting families' needs and understanding what families need happens at a much more local level, and that Virginia is an extremely diverse state with quite different needs around the state. And the idea was we need to have the local infrastructure so that the local level pre-Ks, Head Start, childcare agencies are also sharing this vision of working together towards a shared goal. So the most kind of concrete example of this is the idea of building the ready region so that there's local infrastructure to do all the kind of cohesive work around shared definitions of quality, shared definition of data, all of which are things I'll talk about soon, not just from the state level, but also through building the local infrastructure. And so you can see that over time, we have developed these 9 ready regions around the state. We have sort of, I did not do this. I've just been learning about it and studying it, but Virginia has built the infrastructure to do that. And over time, the kind of supports the state provides to then build the local infrastructure, the connection with local business makers, the understanding of the regional needs has paid off in the ability to collect huge amount of data across the state and work towards this shared vision of quality, which is where I will sort of get to in this second set of innovations. So remember, I sort of noted as the main problem in early childhood right now is the idea that the funding levels that we have in the systems make it too hard at this time to provide high quality. And at the same time, affordability is not there for families. So this has been a huge priority, both for the state and in turn the ready regions, to think about how do we ensure both higher quality programs and access for all families. Okay, so one of the sort of main things people talk about when they're talking about kind of the innovations in Virginia is VQB5, which I think you all have talked about up to a point today as well. But VQB5 was the idea of saying, instead of having all these different programs with all sorts of different ideas of what it means to make a good program or a high quality program, we need to have a cohesive idea about what we mean by quality. And when we say that, we need to anchor it to something that we know is linked to young children's actual development. And that's true if they're going to a pre-K program, a Head Start program, or a family childcare home. There needs to be a focus on what is going to work best for kids. What does the research tell us about the ways to do that? And so what Virginia did is decided to focus on the measures that sort of research tells us are the most important for how kids learn in early childhood settings. The first one and the most salient one is teacher-child interactions. And that means, how are the teachers engaging with kids? How are they talking to them, responding to them, creating safe environments, but also engaging them to ask questions, learn, do all the kinds of things we want in the classroom. And it turns out that to capture that, you can't use the metrics that are typically used by policymakers that are sort of quick and easy to measure, like how many kids are in the room, or does the teacher have a degree, or these kind of very easy to measure metrics. To really understand the quality of interactions, you need to observe the quality of interactions. And that is sort of what Virginia set out to do. So to do that, they've developed sort of a system in collaboration with the Ready regions to be able to go observe every classroom within every publicly funded program around the states multiple times throughout the years to sort of observe what is happening for kids. Is this engaging? Is this the kind of classroom we want for our kids? And I want to just sort of pause and say how totally at odds this is with how most states think about quality. And that's because first off, in most states, you have these different sectors, and each sector has completely different definitions of what quality means. So what a pre-K program might mean by quality is, does it look like our K-12 system? Is there a teacher with a degree in the room? Do we have the set ratios for the classroom? Do we use the required curriculum? But in a childcare setting, in many states, there are no requirements for who the teacher is in the room, what training they've had, what kind of experiences they have. And the focus when childcare centers talk about quality is a lot more linked to licensing and ensuring safety. So it is a real big change to say, let's all share one definition, and let's make that definition really linked to children's actual learning and the factors that can drive that. Also, in many states, it's voluntary. If you want to measure quality, you can opt into a system to measure quality, and you can imagine who would like to opt into a system to measure quality, and it's often not going to be the programs that need their quality assessed the most. And so basically around the country, there are lots of quality improvement efforts that are continuing to be fragmented and continuing to sort of build some parts of the system, but not others. Virginia's approach is completely universal. All programs have to participate in it. And there's really a lot of clarity and support around, if you are struggling with these teacher-child interactions, here's how we can help you. But it's putting everyone on sort of the same page to think about quality in a unified way. So since the PDG started, this has been scaled up throughout the state, starting with a pilot and growing every year, so that now this quality information, including the interactions that I mentioned, which are done using a system called the class, as well as measures of curriculum, which capture what kids are actually learning within the classroom, are getting collected in 100% of programs. Every program in the state that receives public dollars is getting these observations, and we are able to now see what quality looks like around all programs in the state. And what's more, this is just showing the rapid growth. So you can see that in the most recent program, in the most recent year, there have been over 20,000 of these observations, which is a really a massive increase in a tool that takes a lot of time to do. And so you might be wondering about and what is that getting us, and how is that working? And I think it's interesting that our early data, talking to surveying all teachers across all these different programs, show incredibly high levels of support for this new approach to measuring quality. So these are surveys of all the early educators in the state, and we heard from about 7,000 of them, which was about 2/3 of all teachers in the state. And you can see that across all sectors, meaning in the family day homes, in centers, Head Starts, public schools, the vast majority of teachers, between 77% and 88%, say they understand the class, they think it's a good measure. And that last set of bars on the far right says, I believe the class is improving my teaching practice. And you can see that in Family Day Home Centers and Head Starts, there's really high level of agreement. And those are the programs where there has been less of this kind of thing up until now, especially in childcare centers, which, like I said, have been less focused on teacher-child interactions, more focused on safety regulations and licensing. So you see a big high level of support. I didn't put it here, but we've also surveyed the directors of these programs about whether this was useful to them. Really high levels of support from directors as well, suggesting they believe this is really helpful. And again, that's kind of a surprising finding as a researcher. Usually when a new system of accountability is introduced, there's a lot of pushback from teachers around kind of the effort it takes or how hard it is, how it doesn't quite align with what they're going to do. And so that statewide, we're seeing such high levels of support fairly early in the implementation is really encouraging. And similarly, this is a figure showing the increase in curriculum use. And so if you look at the public schools, you can see that in public school classrooms, curriculum use was always in place this whole period. They've been using curriculum this whole time. But if you look at the middle set of bars for centers, you can see there's been a huge increase in the likelihood classrooms are using an actual curriculum and working through a set of learning guidelines than before. And in Family Day Homes, you might be wondering what is happening there, because it seemed like it was really good and then there was a drop. And what that drop represents is that simultaneously with implementing this, we've also grown the number of sites that are participating. So in 2022, a lot of new Family Day Homes were put into the system. And as we're getting new programs in, they haven't yet implemented those things, but we anticipate that'll be increasing as well. So just a real change in the landscape as far as how focused we are on children's development across the system, not just in the pre-K programs, but in all the programs. All right. Next, reimbursement, super important one, and one that's probably very salient to folks in the room, is the change in approach to how we fund childcare subsidies. As I noted, one of the biggest problems for childcare nationwide is the mismatch between how much it costs to run a high quality early childhood program and how much families are willing to pay. And we've had subsidies, but the way that subsidies have been funded up until now has used kind of a market rate to determine how much money we give childcare providers when they take a childcare subsidy or agree to serve a publicly funded child. And the way the market rate surveys worked is they said, let's index how much we give each center per child based on what other sites are paying their teachers, because that must be enough. The challenge with that is that all sites, whether they're private or publicly funded, are struggling with the same extremely tight margins and the fact that it is very expensive to do work that is so focused on the labor of individual teachers. It is expensive to be in a toddler classroom where you can have only a few children per adult in the room, and it's just inherently expensive. And so the way that all states nationwide have been funding their subsidy system has sort of embedded into it a subpar level of funding if you wanted to be compensating your teachers at a rate that would make it worth their while to stay in their job, or even just be similar to other low-wage job opportunities they can have. Virginia is one of 3 states that recently took a new approach to how they were going to cover the rates of subsidies, where the idea was, rather than indexing what we're going to pay centers to what other sites are paying, let's just figure out what would it cost to provide actual high quality care. And so there was some sort of modeling to try to determine how much that would cost, with the idea being we need to index this to what we pay other teachers. How do we make teaching in a childcare center have enough resources so that teachers, who are the main drivers of quality and the main drivers of access, can do their job? And so that's what Virginia did. And like I said, they were among the first 3 states in the nation to do that. And in October of 2022, those new rates went into effect, creating very large increases in how much sites were reimbursed per subsidized child they were going to serve. So you can see about a $19 a day increase for full day and $13 a day increase for part day programs, which is a very large increase, with biggest increases for infants and toddlers. And so recently we did a survey of all the childcare center directors in the state to ask them how this went. And you can see that the directors thought this had a major impact on what they were able to do. So we had 70% of directors of childcare centers, 72% of family day homeowners reporting that the new rates led them to increase their subsidized enrollment. Meaning right now in Virginia, childcare centers typically, the ones that accept subsidies, only accept subsidies for about a quarter of the kids in the site on average. We're really surprised by that low rate. What this is saying is, oh, now with the new rates, with this being more aligned with what it actually cost us to serve, we're willing to serve more kids with subsidies because the rates are better. We had 87% of childcare center directors saying this was improving their financial situations. Most directors said it was improving the quality of care at their site. Most said it was really reducing their stress. And roughly 90% of sites said they were able to recently give teachers raises to help them stay. And when we asked them, what are the factors that allowed you to give teachers raises? 54% indicated that it was the new rates that was sort of a driving factor that allowed them to increase their rates. So in all these ways, the new rates that are trying to capture the actual cost of paying teachers and providing high quality are leading at least directors to say that things are really improving. They're able to pay their teachers more, provide higher quality, and ensure their financial stability. You can see that over this time, there's also been a very large increase in participation of children using the subsidies, which is sort of aligned with what we're saying, where when the rates were aligned with what with more sort of ability to cover the actual costs, sites were willing to take them, and families showed up and took up those opportunities. And you can see that there's been this sort of rapid increase over recent years at the same time as the new rates went in the number of families that are interested in participating in the program. And as the rates make it sort of more high quality, stable opportunity for families, families take up those opportunities. So those two things, the kind of system-wide focus on quality as measured by teacher-child interactions, and the new rates, which are trying to cover what it would actually cost to have teachers that can provide the care that kids need, are the two sort of most salient innovations that people point to about Virginia as being two really innovative and interesting things. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight is the ability to sort of track our progress and know what's happening. There are two sort of big innovations in this bucket that I wanted to briefly highlight. The first is that unlike most states, Virginia has built a system that allows us to answer the kind of key critical questions about early childhood. So if you come out and say, like Virginia said, our vision is that all families have affordable access to and support to choose the option that meets their unique needs. You need to know if you're doing that. And in most states, there has been no way to do that. So just very basic questions like how many children have access to full day care, or how many are on wait lists, or how many programs have openings right now, or how many more slots would we need to fully meet demand. Those kind of questions have just been sort of a complete black box and difficult for states to answer. For me, as someone who sees teachers and the workforce as the key driver of a lot of these access and quality questions, I have been frustrated for sort of decades at how hard it is to answer these questions. We know so much about K-12 teachers, but we know nearly nothing about kind of the whole early childhood workforce. How much instability is there? What are pay? Do you get more pay when you stay longer? what is happening over time. All of that has been a complete black box. And since 2019, Virginia has worked to sort of build the best early childhood data system that I'm aware of in the nation to try to be able to answer these key questions and measure all these pieces. And so Link B5 is that data system, and it includes all programs in the state that receive any public dollars. So again, to that fragmentation point, this is not a data system just for Head Start or pre-K. This is all childcare centers, pre-K, Head Start in a single system. It currently includes 10,681 classrooms and 24,000 educators within them. And the kinds of information we have about those classrooms is extremely unusual and vast. We know about the quality as measured by the class and the curriculum we were talking about, the teachers. We know if teachers are staying or leaving. We know if the site is struggling to open classrooms. We know whether the site is full or whether they have wait lists and who they have the wait list for. Do they have wait lists just for the infants but are totally over enrolled for their 4-year-olds? All that information is now ready and allowing us to understand problems both at the state level and the regional level so that we can address them fully. So as just one example, using the data in Link B5, one of the things our team was able to do is really track in Virginia just how much teacher turnover is there in early childhood setting, and how does that look for different kind of settings. So if you look at those first 2 bars, what that's showing you is that between 2022 and 2023, a third of the teachers who worked in a child care center in the fall of 2022 were no longer there the following fall, meaning a third of teachers left their site. It's a very high rate, and that's for the lead teachers. If you look at the gray bars, those are the assistant teachers. So basically 2 in 5 assistant teachers who are there one fall are gone by the spring. That's an incredibly disruptive level of turnover that impacts kids, that impacts the ability to stay open, all those factors. And then the next 6 bars do the same thing, but first for childcare centers, then for Head Start, and then for public schools. So you can see we have turnover issues right now in all 3 sectors, and they are pretty serious turnover issues. But in childcare centers, they are the most pronounced, with about 40% of lead teachers leaving from one fall to the next. And it's roughly 50% of assistant teachers in childcare gone. This is really unique information we haven't been able to have before for Virginia, and allows us to come up with specific policies and interventions to try to address that and try to target those at the groups that need it most, in particular, the assistant teachers in childcare centers, who are a really critical part of the workforce, but are churning at extremely high rates. Not only can we do this at the state level, maybe we can only do it at the state level now. Are you able to? Working on it. Cool. There we go. We are now able to make the data available for each of the 9 ready regions and each of the localities within the ready regions. So if you look here, these are showing the same turnover rates, but specifically for Richmond, so that if you are trying to understand what is happening in your community, you're able to look that up. And we've made all these things publicly available so anyone can use them, but have also spent a lot of time with the ready regions trying to make this as accessible as possible. It's pandemonium. All right, so moving along. So not only do we have the state data and we have the local data, we are now becoming sort of a place. Virginia is becoming a place that nationally people are turning to learn about the work we are doing, because it's so unusual to have this data. I'm highlighting here work that our team has done with VDOE and VECF to try to understand strategic efforts to stabilize the workforce and compensate teachers better. This has been an issue that the whole country is struggling with, and where lots of people are turning to us. This is just highlighting that the work that Virginia's done on teacher compensation was in the economic report of the president as highlighted nationally as an exemplar. And of course, doing the innovations is a huge part of that, but having the data to test them and see if they work is another important piece so that we can see what's working, what's not working, and other places can look to us for advice about how to potentially organize these things. And then beyond that, beyond Link B5, which I told you is our data system that allows us to see everything about the educators and the kids and the programs that are available in the state. The other final innovation I wanted to highlight is VA Connect, which is an effort to connect Link B5, that data system, to the data we are already collecting about how young children are actually learning. So this is literacy data and data on math and kids' social and emotional learning. Really the whole set of things we are hoping early childhood investments lead to for young children. We collect a lot of that information and are now building a system to put that all in one place so that we can better understand key questions like not only how much are kids coming to school ready to learn, but when we invest in stabilizing the teacher workforce, if we make an investment in a community to do that, do we see improvements? Do the kids do better? Or if we see big trajectories of improvement in quality as far as the class and teacher-child interactions, to what extent is that translating to improvements in kids' learning? And so a lot of states and a lot of researchers sort of work on the assumption that if we make investments in early childhood, we should see returns on kids' learning, both at kindergarten entry and at third grade and beyond. Virginia is going to have the capacity to really test that in real time, linking information about kids' experiences to how they do in school. And that is kind of a huge opportunity to understand what works and ensure that our investments are actually paying off. So back to my large achievement slide, I wanted to highlight Virginia has made these three major kind of innovation buckets around system building, around funding and quality, as well as around measurement and data. That does not mean that sort of all problems in early childhood have been solved. There's a lot of work still to do around meeting the growing demands for families. We've shown the demand has grown and grown as the programs have become available. How do we continue to meet families' demands as that grows? How do we ensure there are enough programs, which embedded in that is kind of understanding that there are parts of the state in which there is adequate supply and other parts in the state where it's very hard for families to find the programs they need. Understanding that not all programs meet all families' needs, understanding there are regions in the state where families are looking for nighttime care or evening care, weekend care, because that's where the employment is overall. How do we meet those needs for other kinds of care? And then how do we continue to support the workforce, which is sort of the backbone of all of this? We know that in Virginia right now, there are still many sites that are turning families away because they can't find the teachers to teach in those programs. How do we make investments in the new rates, in supports for teachers that make it feasible for teachers to do this work and to stay in this work? So there's a lot of work to be done, but those kind of investments in system building at the state level, system building at the local level, infrastructure, as well as data to track are hopefully going to allow us to do that more systematically in a way that we can sort of address these charges more effectively. I will stop there. Our team is called C Partnerships again, and I put our website up there if you want to learn more, or you can always email me and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Does anyone have questions? Whoa, does anyone have questions for Daphne before she leaves the stage? Yes. You got to have a microphone. You got one. Great.
Okay, can you go back to slide 44?
I cannot, but I am hopeful that somebody can. Or maybe.
Tech gurus.
Someone can. Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. So are the home care providers included in the childcare centers or just a separate category?
great question. They're not up here because turnover in a family day home is a really different construct. Nearly all the family day homes in Virginia don't have employees other than the main provider. And so we think about that as more business, like a provider going out of business or shutting down. There are some providers that have 1 or 2 employees, sometimes 3 employees, very rarely. We have looked at that. And so turnover at those sites can be pretty high as well, but it is a pretty different construct to think about family day homes shutting down relative to these programs that are more sort of employer based.
I think that would be really helpful for the commission to see though, because obviously that takes that provider completely out. And we know that that's a common feature for our rural communities.
Yeah.
And then
totally.
secondly, looking at this, do you have an idea if it is representative of the 9 ready regions, or these numbers vary greatly depending on the ready region?
That's a great question. So we have done that, and actually, again, if you go to this portal, which I should have provided an actual link for you, you can see it for each of the ready regions. So there are definitely variations around the state in kind of how severe the gap between assistance versus leads are, or how this looks. I would say there's no ready region that does not have this basic profile of like, we are struggling to keep our teachers. So it is not the case that, say, in Central Virginia, it's a lot more stable than in other places. So the workforce challenges are everywhere, but the details vary across settings.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say I have a question on the same slide if she wanted to stay on it, but go ahead.
I do too.
Go ahead. Go ahead,
I-
Delegate
All
Bulova.
right. Great slide, really important slide. So
All right,
wanted
back
to
to
see
you.
if we have the capacity to dig that next level deep, right? Which is, why did you leave and what would have allowed you to stay? And so, the kind of the exit poll, was it dollars? Is it exhaustion? Is it combination of the two? What would have enabled you to stay in that position? Because a lot of the legislation that we're getting, especially the ones that are going to have budgetary impacts, are, how do we recruit and then how do we retain that talent? And so I think that's an area where it's very important, but we're going to need to be efficient with respect to how we prioritize our dollars. And this seems to be like it might be a way to do that.
Yeah, totally. Those are a lot of great questions and totally a focus for our team. So one thing we do or have been doing is a workforce survey where we take all the teachers who are in Link B5 and send them a survey in the spring about their experiences. And that includes any teacher that was in Link B5 in the fall, but by the spring is somewhere else, meaning teachers who have left to do any number of things. And so they get the survey too. They get a version of the survey that we call the leaver survey that asks them a lot of those questions around what made you leave? What are you doing now instead? How is, what might have made you stay? And so we have done some reports around the leavers in particular. There are a variety of reasons people leave, and some of them are personal reasons and just sort of life reasons. But something like high 80% of teachers say low pay was a driver of their decision. And the other things that come up is sort of not feeling particularly supported in their jobs as far as what they were doing. We're doing a bunch of work right now, since so much of the teacher turnover is among assistant teachers and among new teachers in their first year. We're doing work about what is it that some sites do in the first year that works really well? What are the onboarding practices and supports that can really make a difference? Because I think the compensation issue is pervasive and all the teachers are saying, I might do this more with higher pay, but there are also sites without great pay that are able to retain their teachers year after year. We've been looking at sites that have sort of regular stability, and it seems like there are supports that can be happening at the site level around how we sort of onboard teachers, what kind of mentorship they have, what kind of supports from other educators that make a difference. And so we're putting some of that out. But I would say the most salient things that come for teacher is working conditions. Then when we ask them, how do you like your new job? I think teachers for the most part really liked working with kids, wanted to do their job, but say things like, I could never afford my own rent. I couldn't make it work. And so I had to switch. And when we see teachers switch from one childcare site to another site, that is the main way we see teachers getting raises in this job. And so when teachers move, it's oftentimes to a position within another childcare place that is able to pay them more. So I think all those things are suggesting that the ability to compensate teachers is probably the driving force of what we can do, even though there are supports at the site level that could be very important as well.
I had another question on the same slide. So there's a big difference between public schools and childcare centers, and didn't know if you had data on that gap, but also whether or not the public school numbers reflect they actually stayed in that position and didn't just stay in the public school setting.
Great questions. So a few things. One, when I saw those public school numbers, they seemed really high to me. Usually the gap between turnover at public schools and turnover in childcare is even larger because turnover in public schools doesn't tend to be this high. So I contacted my colleague at UVA who's doing really similar work in K-12, and this is pretty much right on the money for what K-12 teacher turnover looked like that year as well, which is striking and troubling on its own, that just the turnover is really high. It is the case that what you're saying is right, where what we're able to track is basically, are you an early educator in the system, which is just defined as working in a pre-K classroom in the public school. So there is definitely a possibility that some of what we're calling turnover is just a teacher who is in the pre-K classroom moving to the third grade classroom or moving within the school, which isn't turnover in the same sense, but it's actually quite infrequent for the pre-K teachers to do that. So the biggest share of this is actually teachers leaving their site.
Other questions while she's still up there? Yes.
Just a clarification. The navigator, which might be on the next slide or the slide before that showed, yeah, I was just wondering, how do we access that? What email address would we go to? Or I mean, what site address?
Let me, who is the best person for me to give that information to share it out with everyone?
Kathy.
Okay, I will, right after I get off the stage, give it to Kathy so she can share it. And, you know, this particular navigator is about turnover, but we have made a bunch of them now about data from families' experiences in Virginia, families, directors' experiences. There's just a ton of information that's all set up now so you can look at it for your specific region, and we're hoping to do a lot more of that. And I will just sort of flag, that's been something that has been a real priority for VCF and VDOE to get the data we're collecting back in the hands of local leaders working on this. And in our meetings with them, that they have really positively reacted to this. They say that having their own local information has been very powerful for going after their own fundraising efforts, raising resources, and also working together with the public schools and highlighting how things are similar or different across sectors. So we've been pretty excited about the power of the local data.
I think it's back to slide 40. But this was about the surveys of, is this
About the class?
the classroom and whether or not, from a metric perspective. It was one more, it was the bar chart.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I'm just, is it what?
So class, so the second graph there, class is a good way to measure. Do we have any sense of the 25% who are saying this isn't the right way to measure, what their recommendations would be, or how they think the data collection could be improved?
That's a good question. So we do ask them a lot of questions on the survey about, you know, their experiences within it. I think for the most part, the feedback has been positive. You see that like sometimes the least positive responses, I think, come from the public schools. And that's because they are much more, I think, accustomed than the other programs to having observations, having curriculum in the first place. So this is not, for them, it's less like, do you like this particular, you know, they've had a lot of other things to compare it to and might have feelings about it, whereas the other sectors, this is newer to them, and I think very viewed as a really useful change. I haven't seen, I mean, we have all the written responses for what they like or don't like, and I think there hasn't been like a fundamental issue other than that. I think it's pretty common for teachers to struggle with somebody's coming into my classroom and observing me and those kinds of things, and is an added stress. The kinds of things teachers might write in when they are more negative about it are, I am a special educator and I feel like my classroom works in a really different way, or I'm a Montessori educator and I'm not sure this tool makes sense for our specific classroom, but nothing around kind of, teachers on the whole tend to really buy into the fundamental aspects of the class around the importance of teacher-child interactions and how much that drives kids' learning. So we haven't seen any sort of rejection of the premise of what's getting evaluated.
No, and I appreciate that. I think I'm surprised though by the sort of outcome-based, right? So even though there's broad sort of acceptance and support of the measurements, the fact that the application of those measurements in terms of the teacher's perspective on the outcomes in the classroom seem
Oh,
low.
like children's learning. Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And so one of the things we're working on right now and relates to the VA Connect stuff and the ability to connect the class data and the quality data to how kids are ultimately doing in classrooms is to test exactly that idea. And actually, prior to working a lot in Virginia, we were evaluating something really similar in Louisiana, where we tried to test this idea of like, when interactions improve, does learning improve as well? And in that case, there was no data system like this, but our team just went in and collected data on kids in the fall and then came back in the spring to see how much are kids learning. In that case, it was really clear that when the interactions were stronger in the classrooms, the kids definitely did learn more, which is what research suggests. So I think kind of the link between how teachers perceiving it, we would like that to be higher for sure, but I think the important piece will be connecting it to actual kid outcomes and testing the extent to which those interactions are actually leading to improvements, which I think we are about a year from being able to do really well with the Virginia data, and much better than we did in Louisiana. That was like in 100 classrooms. Here, we should be able to do it in every classroom in the state and look at those quality measures and connect those to the kid outcomes. Yeah, it's a great question.
We have someone on Zoom who's been waiting to ask a question, so I'm gonna let them go and then I'll come over here.
You want to ask him to unmute John, or I can?
John,
Hi.
thank you.
Sure, it's John Saley. Thank you for all of that. Coming from the mental health field and working with a lot of mental health agencies, that we've noticed in the past few years during COVID and the aftermath of it is that turnover rate for direct care workers, like folks that are in the home, is probably like 100% at some agencies. So I wonder if you have data going back pre-COVID for this category compared to the 2023 year.
Yeah, that is a great question. I mean, I think that what you described is definitely salient sort of nationwide and in the Virginia data. So one answer to your question is through the same workforce surveys that we've been talking about, we have every year been collecting data on teachers' mental health and things like depressive symptoms and stress and overwhelm. And those for sure, we have both before and during COVID, and there was a huge spike in those measures across all of the sectors. And in fact, the biggest spike we saw were actually among school-based teachers, but we saw increases for all early educators that were much higher than what was observed in the population at large, or for women or women of a similar age. So we definitely saw that the care work became much harder during COVID, and we saw this spike. One of the things that we are really excited about is that the data is now allowing us to do more of what you're describing of tracking changes over time. And so we are finally starting to see things move in a more positive direction. We're seeing the turnover drop a little bit and start moving towards rates that, I mean, the rates are still high, as I just showed you, and they continue to be problematically high and disruptive, but they are moving away from the kind of peak we saw at the height of COVID. And so, the ability to track that over time, and the ability to test whether the specific strategies the state's using around kind of the new rates, which we're hoping translate to higher compensation and supports for teachers, lead to sharper declines in turnover, is something that is very much on our mind. But yes and yes, they are high, but we are starting to see things improve.
And Stacy Vance on Zoom has a question as well. Stacy, if you could unmute and you can ask your question.
Hi, I'm not sure if it's much of a question, just as some comments coming from like a public school teacher. Sometimes if like the pay in the centers aren't that great, but the environment is good, it makes teachers want to stay a little more. And sometimes if the pay is really good, but the conditions aren't good, teachers aren't going to stay. And I think that comes with, of course, quality of teachers with the class program. And I guess that's kind of a question. I've been a class observer and I've gone to centers and, observed, and I've been in the fall and the spring, and the teachers and the staff is different because of the turnover rate. But how do you know, or do you hold the center directors kind of accountable for like enforcing, or not enforcing, but kind of making sure their teachers are working on things to better their center? Because I think that's a lot of the problems, because in my experience using class in a pre-K in a public school, is it has helped with learning, only just because the interactions, and there's less discipline problems. So I doesn't know how the centers are being held accountable to ensure that they're making sure their teachers and their staff are kind of holding up to class, to kind of better, their environment and their teachings.
Yeah, that is a really good point. I think that we are learning that the directors have a huge impact on the extent to which, like the actual process of class isn't just about measurement and somebody coming in and watching you in the fall and coming back in the spring, but it's kind of changing the culture of what's happening in the center, changing the supports that are happening, and changing how people interact, not just during those like 2 hours that they're getting observed, but sort of year round. I think what teachers say on the surveys is that directors play a huge role in that, and we have tried to understand that better, as far as we do see considerable variation in how much directors understand the class, how much they've done the class training themselves, how much they're sort of taken the time to understand it, and how much they think it's made like a cultural shift within their program. And again, it'll be cool to then see, which we should be able to do soon, the extent to which those directors' beliefs translate into better trajectories on improvement and what allows them to do that. And we have seen already that when teachers get more of these kind of on the ground supports of having a mentor teacher, or having someone to talk to, or being able to watch a more experienced teacher, or take the time to do those things, their own sense of kind of both agency about their ability to work with kids, and their kind of view of themselves as an early educator, or view that this is something they want to do, is improved. So there are things I think that you're touching on that are really important around how the climate at the center, the supports from the director as well as from your colleagues, can make a real big difference in how you view the job, and how much you feel like you have the ability to sort of impact kids' outcomes.
Just another piggyback question on that. Is there any, now this again will have to become with funding, but any type of like incentive to offer like centers, like if they, improve their class score, or if they implement this or something that may motivate them to kind of use it more, or implement any of those techniques?
Yeah, that's a good question. And Jenna, I don't know if you want to take that. I think where we are right now is in the kind of, we have just gone to statewide implementation of everyone doing it. And this is about kind of building familiarity and getting it collected. But obviously the thinking behind it has to do with building an accountability system. And embedded in that is everything you're saying about creating real incentives and motivations for teachers, for directors, for families to get really sort of aware of these quality measures, care about them, and drive them. Jenna, did you want to?
Sure. Thanks, Stacy. It's a great question. So the original law, Delegate Bulova's law, does call for contemplating incentives and consequences. I think we want to continue to use the actual data from Virginia to figure out how that makes most sense. So when we started, the primary incentive was around participation, right? Recognize B5, which went to every educator and family childcare who worked more than 30 hours a week just for doing this, recognizing, as Daphne talked about, just the significant change from not having to be measured at all to being a part of this. As we roll out, we're thinking both about what are the ways to recognize programs, how do you do that through the online portal for families, sharing the incredible work that's happening in childcare and family childcare, in addition to schools and Head Start programs. thinking about things like honor rolls and recognizing programs that do very good work with infants or toddlers. And ultimately, I think continuing to kind of think about financial incentives. The tricky part there is just recognizing that you want everybody to improve. And so being careful about who initially has more. A lot of the way systems are initially set up in other states is that they gave you money for getting to a certain level. And what they found over time is only the sites that were in wealthy neighborhoods that could pay more were kind of getting those incentives. And so it wasn't really having the system-wide impact of improvement. You've seen similar things around looking at kind of incentives in K-12. It's a pretty tricky business. I will note that this year, although there are no consequences in which we take away funding, we discern that's not appropriate yet, that the state is really focused on those programs that are not meeting the expectation. And so we know of those sites that are below the threshold, that if any of us walked into one of those classrooms, whether in a public school or childcare setting or family childcare setting, that we would be concerned about what kids are experiencing, that they will be required to participate in site improvement planning or coaching, right? And so that the state will play a very active role looking across the 11,000 classrooms, seeing where interactions are not of sufficient quality, and making sure that we work with them month after month through a set of coaches that will go out, connect them with resources, and ultimately, hopefully, really lift the floor in a way so that over time, what you'll see are incentives for improvement, incentives for those very high performers who are kind of exceeding exploration of financial incentives, but ultimately really making sure no matter where you go in the Commonwealth, if you need to rely on a public dollar for mixed delivery, subsidy, preschool, that you know it's of a certain level of quality and that parents can trust in that quality.
Can we go back to the turnover slide?
Maybe.
And I want to ask a question and then clarify for the group what that means. The turnover slide that we have is Link B5 data, correct? And so most of what we're talking about today has been any center that accepts public funds, but there are certainly plenty of centers and plenty of institutions in Virginia that provide care that do not accept public funds. They're solely private pay. Do we have an idea of the difference in the numbers, how many children in Virginia for family choice purposes we're talking about that are impacted by the data that you're doing? And this is tremendous. It's a tremendous information to have, but I believe it's a small subset of the overarching industry. And so do we have an idea of sort of where that falls, what that number looks like?
Yeah, great question. So Link B5, you're right, is collecting data about when we show those childcare bars, those are childcare sites that are approved to accept subsidies, which means sites that are not accepting subsidies are not included in that. It is not a small, so in doing that, we're missing an important sector, but this is, so basically about half of Virginia childcare private licensed providers take subsidies and half don't. So we are missing like half of the childcare settings here. What we do to get around that, which is incredibly, so that's an incredibly important part of the puzzle. This is not a small one, but that is also important, is we survey all those providers as well. It's not the same as Link B5, but we have for the past 4 years been doing a provider survey that goes out to all the publicly funded and not publicly funded sites to ask them questions about their finances. Are they breaking even? How are things working for them? As well as lots of things about workforce, because that is the key place their funding is going. And so if you look at sort of turnover from the provider survey and compare the private programs to the private programs that don't take any subsidies to the ones that do, they look different. They still struggle with a lot of the same issues. They would probably end up being sort of between the childcare center bar you see here and the Head Start bar you see here. So they struggle less with turnover. They are more likely to say, we've made a profit this year. They are less likely to say, we're turning families away because we can't hold our teachers. So there's definitely a difference. They are doing better financially than the publicly funded sites, but not much better. They don't look like the programs that are receiving the higher levels of funding, like a pre-K program or a Head Start, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question? And I think that's super important. And it's important in part because I think part of the motivation is to try to get more programs around the state to want to participate and be open to that. And the idea is making the subsidy level so that a site can be sort of indifferent between taking a private pay child and taking a subsidized child, because the money they're going to see from that is close to equivalent, and which is what has happened with the new rates.
Any other questions? Yes. Belinda on Zoom, you can unmute and ask your question.
It's really not per se a question, but I know where we are from Petersburg South, there are little to no mixed delivery programs even available. How do we even fix that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, so I think that right now there, like this, and again, maybe Kathy or Jenna want to answer that question, but I think right now we're trying to operate on a bunch of different fronts. So it's, how do you get the programs that are already willing to take subsidized kids to take more? Like I said, we're seeing sites take about 25% of their kids with subsidies. How do we increase that? How do we get more of the childcare centers in that half that aren't participating to be willing to participate? And then mixed delivery, which has been sort of a very promising model. How do we make more of that opportunity available to sites to grow those programs and to have more of that available? Those are like, all three are simultaneously tracks we're on to try to improve. Kathy, do you want to say any more about mixed delivery, or are we? Okay.
I have one final one, I think.
Yeah.
If you could go back to your slide that had VKRP, vowels, and the link B5 all shown on it. Really more of, I guess, probably what resonated with me about this slide, being a relatively new legislator, when I got into the legislative body, I had no idea how little updated screening tools we had in Virginia. I mean, our old PALS, our old literacy screener, had not been updated in like 20 plus years. And it's what we were using to figure out if our kids were reading or not. And nobody had let legislators know that we hadn't put money into updating that. So I think one of the things that this screen stood out to me, we as a state have invested a lot into updating our data collection, but also the underlying tools and the screeners and assessments to keep them up to date. And the one thing I don't want to leave us here is we can't stop. So what happened 20 years ago is we developed a screener and we said we did it and we checked the box and we moved on. One of, I think, the expectations our families and our educators have of us is that if we can make a screener shorter, if we can make it easier to administer and faster and take up less teaching time, that we continuously work to do that. So this slide really stood out to me right now. I think we're one of the top states in the nation with our updated screeners and our data assessment, but we don't stay there unless we keep putting that money back in to all of these various tools that allow us to see what's happening. So this slide in particular stood out to me. Thank you, Daphne, for all of your work in this area. All right, that gave us a whole lot to think about. I'm going to stay right here so I can transition us into our next portion. And this is our last working group for today, y'all. So we've done a great job getting to this point. We are going to now take the next 20 minutes to discuss the following questions. You see them up on the slide deck. Our Zoom participants, if you all, once we get started, would unmute and work together in Zoom world, that would be appreciated. And use your sticky notes, please, again, to collect all the points that are made at your table. So the questions are there priorities for the commission you would add that have not been discussed, right? So we discussed at our tables earlier priorities, but we just heard a great presentation with information about where we are. So are there priorities you would add that were not discussed earlier? In ranked order, with number 1 being most critical, what are the priorities for commission focus in the next 6 months? In ranked order, with number 1 being most critical, what are the priorities that would be more thoughtfully addressed in 2025? and what additional data, research, and information would be helpful for the commission's work ahead. So work together, come up with answers to these questions you may have. If you need help from anyone who is our support team here, raise your hand and they'll come over to your table. So again, the next 20 minutes working together, document those on your sticky notes. All right, everybody, I'm going to bring us back together for the final portion of our day. I wandered around for a minute towards the end and great discussion happening at our tables. So thank you for your work at tables, exploring and identifying critical priorities for the commission in both the near term and long term. The feedback, along with your requests for additional data, research and information will inform our next steps and develop our upcoming meeting agendas. So pull out your phones and add to your calendar as a reminder, our next meeting will be right here at Reynolds on August 19th. If a colleague is missing, send them a text right now and say, we would love to see you at our next meeting. It's so important to have all the voices in this room. You know, the creation of this commission was very intentional around diversity of voice, of background, of regions. And if someone's missing, it's a piece of Virginia that's not represented at our table. So it's really important that we encourage folks to attend, and we appreciate your time and dedication that you gave today. I'd also like to give a big thank you to our VECF and VDOE staff and everybody working at the back tables. Can we give them a big thank you for their support? And I'd also like to thank John in the back of the room. He's been following us around with cameras all day and his support from Reynolds. So thank you, John, for all of your work and capturing where people are standing so that Zoom friends can see us. We will close out today with public comment. I don't believe we have anyone signed up to speak. Is that correct? Okay. All right. Well, with that, before you leave, if someone at your table hasn't signed up, do some positive peer pressure and tell them that sign up list is in the middle of the table. Please consider signing up for one work group. If Senator Locke were here, she would volunteer some of you to add to those work groups. That's how Housing Commission works as our chair. She starts telling people where they're going to go, which is really helpful. I would also remind you that your sticky notes from this last discussion, if you would please, someone hold all of those up or your pieces of paper. That is how we're going to develop the next agenda. So it's really important that the notes you took from that last tabletop discussion, that our amazing support team is able to collect those. So with that, we proceed to adjournment. Thank you to every commission member for your time today. Have a wonderful rest of your week.